one of the most difficult decisions I made in production was to cut the footage I was in as the interviewer of my grandmother. And yeah, so the interviewee was my grandmother, and I was planning to be the interviewer. And that did not work out, unfortunately, because you have to be behind the camera to really gauge the direction of the shoot and overall the film. And I know lecturer said you shouldn't put yourself behind the camera. It doesn't give you much any control at all, and he was right. I had very blurred footage when I was asking the questions, which was what I wanted to use in a sort of interview format. One shot would be me, and then the other shot would be my grandmother, the interviewee. But that unfortunately did not work, so I had to change my storyboard in that I was narrating the interviewee's experiences, and I sort of had to arrange it in that the interviewee was answering questions, and it didn't, it's difficult because you usually might need to have the question there, because otherwise it can sound quite, when the interviewee answers, it can sound sort of not direct enough, and the audience may not be able to know what the initial question was. But I think despite that huge inconvenience and that happening, and I shot it twice and it still was blurry, it was very disappointing. I think I overcame that well. I also did not anticipate the amount of time setting up and shooting my film would take. 3 whole days. I thought I would take 2 days, maybe even 1. I didn't anticipate for 3 days at all. On the first day, half the day was spent setting up, and I think I should have, being new to not really new to the camera, but new to the lighting, to the audio mics. I think to the lighting of the room as well, not just the lighting of the actual LEDGO kit camera. LEDGO kit lighting set. The actual lighting in the room, and how I had to shut all the curtains to take away the the overexposure. That was really a new experience for me, difficult experience, I suppose, trying to figure out how to arrange everything so that I would show enough exposure of my video, and it wouldn't all be white patches. But yeah, that was that. I also found this quite draining. I expected this to not that setting up to not take so long, and then having to reschedule and get everyone down there and have my grandma ready to go. It was more difficult than I anticipated. Yeah, definitely. I also had a few problems with the mics where I wasn't sure if they were picking up the audio, and this was because I had one of the lapels set up to a my phone, and my phone already has a built-in microphone, so I wasn't sure if it was picking up. When I heard it back, I wasn't sure if it was picking up the actual iPhone microphone audio, so that was annoying. But yeah, I think it's that from the production phase. Post-production for me ran quite smoothly. I felt at this point quite in control of filming, knowing my way around Adobe Premiere Pro, I am sure, being one of the factors for my easy journey. In being introduced to After Effects, there is a lot to learn, that even after creating my short film, I feel I've still only scratched the surface of the After Effects world. Yeah, so post-production, I think, was probably in about the middle of my, not too easy, not too hard. During post-production, I underestimated the amount of time I required to create the project. For hours I'd be sitting in my computer cutting down clips in Premiere Pro and have not much to work to show for it, which was quite disappointing. It took a long time, I think, making those decisions, using Photoshop to get those images in and create those layers for when I go into After Effects and create the 3D animations. That was quite draining. I had to cut down 50 minutes worth of film into finally a 4.5 minute clip, and that was crazy. I had to cut out a lot of stuff that I once first valued as really important, and then I just had to throw it away, and no one was going to see it. So that was quite disappointing. But in the post-production phase, I enjoyed the process of adding After Effects and watching the concepts and ideas of my story come to life. I felt even though it was a long process, the results were well rewarding. I do wish I could have spent a little bit more time learning the new skills rather than jumping right into it. I felt I didn't have enough of a grasp on After Effects when I first jumped into creating the animations for my film, and I think I would have wished I think I do wish I would have had a little bit more experience before I jumped in. Yes. So here are my After Effects conceptual development. So I had a lot of fun with this. In envisioning the work I would do with After Effects, I was drawn to the idea of a smoky, foggy effect that would push my desired mood of war, hardship and mystery, which is all part of my grandmother's life, the interviewee, her immigration story. I was wanting to introduce the interviewee with a lower third text animation that would, in acknowledging the interviewee, also set the atmosphere. I also wanted to use the typeface of a typewriter and the typewriting effect to evoke a feeling of lack of emotion and desensitization an immigrant may feel as another piece of cargo in the immigration files rather than a human being. So that probably doesn't make much sense, but I kind of wanted to create, I suppose, a very emotionless typeface from the typewriter. I think it it has, so it's a historic looking typeface, and at the same time it doesn't have much expression, I think. So it sort of brings forth, I think, that the idea of immigration, I think, taking away your identity, and especially in that wartime, which it started to become less around. It was not every man for himself in the sense, but I think the Depression during that time that staged the Second World War, I think it just kind of set that mood up of hopelessness and kind of every man for himself. So I wanted the smoke in the animation text to drift off with ease to add to this lackluster and tired mood. So with this planned in mind, I aim to bring my ideas to fruition with a smoke effect entering from the bottom left of the screen and fading away after the name of the interviewee had appeared. Using the effect Particle Playground, I changed the velocity of the particles, the direction, the particles per second, the particle radius, the barrel radius, and the position of the particles so that they would sweep across the screen and fade away like a dust. I had a look at a tutorial before I attempted this, and this is basically what they were using: Particle Playground, CC Particle Playground, I think it was called. And they used this on several layers of, they duplicated this layer and then would move the position of the particles around and blur it out a little bit more, you know, whatever. And I attempted this, and I kind of, you could change the color of the smoke as well, and I just used a white smoke and made it quite opaque, I would say, as the, instead of opacity, I suppose. I think it's opaque, but yeah, I'm not sure. For the text, I added a simple typewriter effect to it and used a font I downloaded from the internet to have an older typewriter look. I animated the text to blur out as the smoke fades away to add to my desired mysterious effect. With the finished project, I exported the animation using RGB plus alpha channel so that the composition would retain its transparency over the top of the interview footage. I had a bit of trouble with this. I didn't know how to change the composition settings, and then when I did, After Effects wouldn't let me render in the actual in After Effects, and I was I can't remember what I did. I think I changed the preferences. I'm unsure how I fixed this, but I was able to in the end render it. I first rendered it as a QuickTime file, and I don't think that worked, so I just kept it to, I think, H.264, I believe, and I just created the, just did it in a RGB plus alpha channel. Yeah, a video tutorial I watched said you should do it in GoPro, 12-bit, something like that, with added RGB plus alpha channel, I think, and it didn't work, and the codec was wrong, probably because the codec wouldn't work and it wasn't formatting, probably because my laptop is a HP, and QuickTime, I'm not sure. QuickTime, I think, is kind of isolated to Mac, so, I mean, that's the only way I know how to explain it, so, you know, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. That's just what I've sort of created in my head, but it wasn't working. I got it to work, though, in the end, but that's good. They're not what I think has been achieved in the video. I think the theme created here demonstrates the tense feeling of war and displacement I wanted to portray. The smoke encourages a sense of mystery and the feeling that something is hidden from the audience. I hope communicating that when first interacting with the interviewee, one would not expect to hear such experiences from a childhood. In terms of continuity, I feel I achieved a graceful entry and exit for this lower thirds animation. I think this After Effects animation blends in well with the footage and communicates my desired effect well. After Effects technical execution. With technical execution, I wanted my animations to be simple enough but have a nice effect and made them interesting with nice transitions. I think I meant to say, but have a nice effect and make them interesting. That's okay. On the right, I was creating the lower thirds text, animating the fade out effect of the text, its duration, how the smoke would fade out. For this 2D layer, I had the smoke move from left to right while the text came in and disappeared. This is all what I talked about in the previous slide. I was also playing with the direction, the velocity and radius of the particle playground layers. Oh, I've just had a typo there. Which create the smoke, moving each layer around to create a more graceful, dynamic look. With the image to the left, down the bottom, I loaded it up after I had formatted it into Premiere Pro, so I'd probably changed the Photoshop file, I think, after I formatted it because I was planning on having this as the start of my logo. The logo start as in the title sequence, and then I realized that wasn't going to work because it doesn't have I need to have what the actual documentary is going to be called. So this was going to be my end logo, so I changed it to logo end after I'd put it into Premiere Pro, which is I think why the images aren't displaying, and it says it was saying the image files couldn't be found, but that's okay. With this effect, I experimented with 3D layering and brought in the layers from the front of the camera to the background, with changing opacity and position while animating a masked eclipse shape with a lens flare or blur, I believe, added over it to create a light beam from the camera, simulating the vintage cinema camera and that projected its tape footage through the light. I can't remember what effect I used on the eclipsed mask, the mask eclipse shape. Either a fast blur or a lens. It wasn't a lens flare. But I changed the direction and kind of narrowed it a bit, and then sort of kept it there to sort of reenact the cameras of the olden days, and have that projecting light that displayed the movie. I thought was a bit nostalgic. With this effect, I experimented with 3D layering. I brought in the layers from the front. Oh, sorry, I just read that. Sorry. I also gave the several layers of text a fast blur effect and a radial fast blur, which I would center from left to right through the text to create a shine through effect. And this was fun. I found this part really fun. I really like doing this. But I used a tutorial I also found online to do that. And it was quite an interesting and fun process. But yes, that's all for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching it. I think my experience with After Effects was it was tedious, but it was fun. So yes.